This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. We are back from our break. Doc, it's been a little bit too long here as we now are in the All-Star break, and the Tigers still look dismal. No doubt about it, but want to introduce you and what the heck happened for you during your vacation.
It was all good, Vito. Much needed. I needed some time off to refresh, regroup, spend time with the little girls. And now I definitely missed you. Missed talking to you about the Tigers. Missed bitching about the nonsense that happened. It was a crazy week as well with the series versus the Indians and what was going on. Many people, Vito, I felt like the anger got ratcheted way up in the week that I was off. And then, in the last couple of days, people have kind of started to say, okay, everybody's on the table. How do we reconstruct the Detroit Tigers? And everybody's kind of going back and forth regarding, different names like Miguel Cabrera, like JD Martinez, Justin Verlander, and then the one that really pissed everybody off, and media's talking about it. Every podcast is going to talk about it regarding the value of trading Michael Fulmer. But it was a great week off because you know how I kind of experienced the Tigers? And there's a great way to describe it. They were basically video wallpaper. They were on in the background a lot of the times, but I wasn't watching intently each and every pitch. And it was great because of the fact that the Tigers, if you look at the Cleveland series, the first couple games, they didn't compete. So I watched them passively, and it's interesting to see kind of how people are reacting to the Tigers. I was talking to Adam about it, and I was telling him, like, look, many people don't care anymore. I think people now are angry. Attendance was way down when they came back from their recent homestand. And I look at the Tigers and I said, hell, I took a vacation. I kind of took a personal vacation from watching the Tigers.
Well, you know what? You talked about Michael Fulmer being dealt. Now, everybody is loving the possibility of, would they really pull the trigger on a deal involving Michael Fulmer, who is their ace of the future, their ace of now, by the way, as well. And the guy they should trade, they should entertain offers for, and it seems like they are now. It's been reported by a few guys that Justin Verlander is openly available on the market, and he should be leading up to that non-waiver trade deadline on July 31, Doc.
What's your opinion? Because guys like Miggy, Justin Verlander have kind of taken the stance and have said, like, look, we're human. When you come in here with a microphone and ask all these questions about these trade rumors, it bothers us. I kind of look at it and I said, if you don't really expect that your name is going to be bantied about, like, are you in denial? This team is about really 95% there to be deconstructed. The team is not winning. And not only are they not playing great baseball, they're getting blown out versus teams that are in their division. They're not playing a great brand of baseball. Hell, if you just look at one singular play in the entire year that encompasses the nonsense that upsets everybody was the Daniel Norris play when the ball is hit to him and he throws it to first base instead of going and hearing 4-4-4 from the entire dugout. Nobody spoke to Daniel Norris. He throws the ball to first when everybody knew, I knew, you knew, the entire dugout knew. And then Matt Shepard put the icing on the cake when he comes on the air and says, I'm standing right here. Nobody said a word. Nobody yelled out for. That cannot happen. That cannot happen in a game of baseball where the fundamentals aren't locked up. They got to be locked up. So the fans are angry. And so for Miguel Cabrera, Justin Verlander to come out and put on this front and say, I can't believe we're talking about trade rumors, you're going to hear about it every single day because that's what we want to talk about is not only what's going on now, the fans are over this year. They're over it. We're over it. You've been over it. What we're talking about now is how do we fix this nonsense? How do we deconstruct this team, and to what degree do we deconstruct it? And so for people like Tony Paul, Bob Winowski to come out and say, stop talking about it, what are you talking about?
Tony Paul did even?
I'm
surprised he did.
He said stop talking about trading Michael Fulmer.
Oh, because it's nonsense, kind of. Don't you think it's nonsense?
No, Vito,
I think it's nonsense.
No, it's not nonsense, Vito, because when Adam and I were bantering, I just threw it out there because when you ask a simple question, is there any untouchables on the Tigers right now? I would say no.
It would be Fulmer, though, if anybody.
No. If the offer is correct, If you get prospects and you feel the deal will net you 3 to 4 potential Michael Fulmers and 3 to 4 contributing players, then you got to make the deal. There is no untouchables with this Detroit Tigers team. And if you want to bury your head in the sand and say, no, Michael Fulmer is a piece, that's fine. What I'm saying is, if there's a great offer that could be accepted that gets you more than one contributing player, you have to seriously look at it, because the Detroit Tigers, when you ask the question, how do you rebuild this? You need a lot of guys. You need a lot of pieces. And unfortunately for Michael Fulmer, his era in Detroit might be marked by futility, by a rebuild. So for the next 5 years, if you want to say that we want to keep Michael Fulmer around, it's going to be losing. So I say, look, let him go, let him flourish. If he's the man, you're going to pay him $200 million anyway. Get him when he's a free agent, pay him the money and bring him back. Make him the last piece to a puzzle if that's the guy that you target for the rebuild. But right now, Vito, everybody is kind of maybe in denial, whereas Adam and I said this is bullshit when they hired Brad Ausmus. This is done. You can't do this. The era's done. I've said on multiple podcasts, the window was shut. Remember the conversation? Is the window closed, open, window? No, shut the window, close the blinds, turn off the lights, start anew. When I come in here, I unlock the door, I turn on the lights, and I start a new day.
And you let me in once in a while.
And I'll let you in once in a while. So what I'm saying is with the Tigers, I'm ready for a complete rebuild, which means, yes, there's going to be some pieces that you have now on this team that are here, but at the same time, you have to evaluate what your assets are and how do you move them along to get more assets. So I'm not offended at all that people are talking about Michael Fulmer. You have to be. The Tigers suck. And what's going on right now is there's no real plan that people are tangibly looking at as to what we're going to do. Everybody's in this holding pattern. Like, are they going to trade JV? Are they going to trade JD Martinez? Is Upton going to opt out? We're in this holding pattern right now, and many people now want answers. I want to know, what's the plan? But if you're going to say and close the door right away on trading Fulmer, if a team comes to you, if the Dodgers and Cubs realize, look, Fulmer's available, and they start going, I'm going to add this piece, this prospect, number 3 in the organization, and the Cubs hear it and you go to them, now you have a bidding war. Maybe you get a similar haul like the White Sox got for Chris Sale. You're going to say no to that because you got one talented arm? If you could get 3 talented arms or 2 pitchers that are serviceable and an everyday player, you got to look at it. That's all we're saying. No one's sitting here going, you have to trade Michael Fulmer. All we're saying is, if the offer is right and it's something you want to listen to, entertain it. I'd entertain trading you. If
you would in a heartbeat. I know you would, absolutely. But the thing is, I won't absolutely entertain the idea of trading Michael Fulmer in a heartbeat. The thing is, they're going to get offers. So the reason why we're talking about him being traded is because the Cubs are interested, supposedly. But which team isn't interested in Michael Fulmer? He's still young and still cheap. But guess what? They don't totally suck right now, the Tigers. They're bad, very bad. But they're not perhaps one of the worst teams in all of baseball, or considered to be that right now because of the presence of Michael Fulmer.
Go away, damn you!
The Tigers, you still say have hope?
No, not for this year. I'm saying they're not as bad off as people think for the future. They're not going to win next year,
man.
But they could win in maybe 2 years from now or 3 years. Let's say 3 years. So they're not going to be in futility for 5 years straight. I don't think they're going to be suffering through that kind of a period of time that lasts 5 years. And then you brought up that Michael Fulmer, maybe you trade him now or next year in the offseason, and then he would resign with the Tigers long-term 5 years down the line. Why would he want to do that after sucking it up? You know, going through this bad period of time with the Tigers. His morale's been killed by the losing, right? By the futility, as you described yourself, that could last maybe upwards of, 4 or 5 years at the worst. That's the very worst case scenario. I don't see it happening. But if it didn't, he had the chance to sign with the Tigers then, 5 years down the line. Why would he do so? He wouldn't want to come back to Motown after what he's experienced, which really hasn't been much winning. At all.
Vito, I really enjoyed talking to you. Remember in the pre-show meeting, I was like, I got to keep these thoughts to bullet points, but I can't because
you're still talking. You said you wouldn't talk and elaborate because of your sore throat you have, and you don't care. You're just letting it loose.
You know what? Like I said, this is what I wanted. I wanted to talk Tigers with people that I care about, and obviously with these thoughts, we're all still passionate. I'm not giving up on the Tigers, but the way I want to encapsulate it and to kind of put my thoughts together is this. I read an article on blessyouboys.com. Great website, a little bit more focused on, the homerish kind of things and thinking in terms of how they present their stuff. But it was a good article, and the article was titled, "The Tigers do not need to completely sell off or rebuild."
Well, correct. They don't need a complete sale.
Disagree.
No fire sale is needed.
I disagree completely. And the premise of that article, if you get a chance to read it, is there's going to be some salaries that naturally are going to fall off the books. So you can keep some of these guys. And the reason why I say, and I disagree with that article, is the reason why attendance is down is because the Tigers are losing. The reason why the attendance is down is because there is such thing as roster fatigue. And the question that I would ask is, do you believe that keeping anybody from this current roster, outside of maybe Justin Upton and Michael Fulmer, anybody would lead you to believe that they're worthy of being on a World Series team? No. My answer is no.
Are you saying guys that are worthy of being on a World Series team right now from the Tigers 2017 roster?
From this roster.
Oh, there's guys that are worthy of it, deserving of it. Verlander still is. He's never won. Cabrera has one, but never with the Tigers.
Verlander is inconsistent.
Verlander is worthy of it.
Nope.
If he goes to another team, would you root him on to win a World Series?
What I'm saying is, at this point in time, if you look at it collectively, the reason why we're talking about trading everybody and a complete fire sale is we want a new team. The fans want a new team, a new set of guys to root for. And that's just the nature of sports. It's not a bad thing. It's not overly cruel. It's just saying that we've put this thesis out there. If you can't win the World Series with Justin Verlander, Miguel Cabrera, Victor Martinez, when you had the 3 Cy Young candidates and the 3 Cy Young caliber arms, when you had those guys, you didn't win. So now you're looking to rebuild with those same guys. I don't want the same mix. I don't want partial mixes going forward. What I would want is, let's just start over, completely destroy the Tigers, and start over and say, okay, we're going to go either youthful. Our strategy might be to go out and get some free agents, or we're going to stink for 5 years with the hopes that we're going to home grow 5 or 6 young guys that are going to come up here, and through draft picks and free agency, we're going to start over. So my thinking and thesis is, I'm a fan of the Tigers, but when I go out there, it's the same boring team because it's the same guys. And the thesis is, these guys aren't going to win a World Series, so let's move them all. Could one piece, maybe a Nick Castellanos, be a contributor? Sure. But James McCann probably is not going to bat over 250. Jose Iglesias, stud defensively. Offensively, it is what it is. You know, your outfield, you have JD Martinez, he's gone. You have Mikey Matuk, but it's Mikey Matuk. You're not going to build a World Series team with Mikey Matuk. Justin Upton, maybe he surveys the landscape and says, I'm done. But if he stays, that's a guy I'm cool with.
Oh, now you are. Well, you know what's funny, though? A lot of people, I don't know if you actually, I don't think you really harped on it and criticized him, but a lot of people have.
It was bad.
And guess what? He made the All-Star team. Now, as a last-minute addition, wasn't officially named to it at first.
But he's also 30 years old, too, and he's making a boatload of money. So you look.
But you got to pay something to get something, too. He's not worth this contract, so he's a lot better than people think.
Is to give the reason why we're talking about this is, I think if you sat down a large majority of fans, I'm not talking about media, I'm not talking about those that are insiders that are in the know. If you just talk to fans, and that's what I consider myself to be, is to be a high-functioning fan.
High-functioning fan, wow, I like that description.
High-functioning fan, and the way I look at it is, the reason why the morale is down, the reason why not a lot of people are into the Tigers right now, attendance is way down, viewership on Fox Sports Detroit is way down. The reason is many people are ready for a turnover of talent. We just want to see something new. Okay, Victor Martinez act is old. Miguel Cabrera, you could keep him around as well. I guess that's another guy you could have around for nostalgia's sake, but his level of contribution, is it going to get back to the old Miggy? That's a question mark. But I think the reason, and it happens in sports, is, and I was telling Jason this, it's an age-old adage, out with the old, in with the new. That's just sports, and I think that's where the fans are at with this team. It's nothing personal. It's strictly business. I think that many people want a new team, a new collection of people to look at and explore and see what their talents are. We already know and assume what these guys are, and this collection of talent was not put together in a way that's going to win a World Series, and we're over it.
But you can keep some of the players, and it's not always what the fans want.
None.
You have to remember, there is PR backlash regarding some of the guys that they would move. Now, I think the Tigers will get, the fans will get what they want regarding Fulmer, which is they won't trade Fulmer. It's really not feasible. They're not going to deal Fulmer. But like, you want Cabrera gone, you want V-Mark gone. Guess what? They're not going to be traded. Verlander, more than likely, I don't see him being traded either.
Their contracts are going to be...
Because of that,
They're going to wear out, and that's it.
You got to wait for V-Mark's contract to expire. You do. Miguel Cabrera might age gracefully more than you think. I don't think he'll ever return to that Hall of Fame caliber level of production, but I think he could become a DH that's consistently productive more than not. So you might get that out of Cabby at the end of his days in a Tigers uniform. And, Verlander, a little bit cheaper. His contract expires before Miguel Cabrera. So they could rid themselves of that big contract sooner than Cabrera. Cabrera looks like they're going to be stuck with that contract for a long time. So maybe you do end up dealing Verlander or just let him part in free agency, or maybe he retires at the end of his contract with the Tigers. But I think Cabrera is going to be here for a while still. Now, V-Mart won't, because once his contract expires, he's a goner. And you got two other guys to bring up whose contracts are expiring outside of JD Martinez, a big fish, whose contract is set to expire at the end of the season. And the Tigers, their hopes of bringing him back, I think, are very lackluster, are well below 50% in so many words. I'm playing a game maybe of Big Vito's over-under, well under 50%. But also Kinsler and Anibal Sanchez. The Tigers have team options for a lot of money that they can pick up regarding those two guys if they want to keep them for next year. So they're not going to do it with either Sanchez or Kinsler. So they do lose a lot of money in losing JD Martinez after this year, who's going to be due for a big payday, obviously, as we know. And Kinsler is due for a big payday. He's making a lot of money right now. They lose his contract. And Sanchez, he's well overpaid. They lose that contract as well. They save a lot of money. I mean, that does help out for the future. Not that they're going to win or, go all in and pay for guys to add talent for next year's roster to win next year. But I'm saying some contracts are going to be removed. So the situation is not as dire of a situation for the Tigers to get rid of contracts, to unload the big ones on their current roster.
Okay, so the question I would ask you is this. How do the Tigers get some juice? How do they inject any kind of life into this season at all? And I would say if you just were not going to make any roster moves, let's say you want to agree with the Bless You Boys article and you keep the roster the same.
Well, I don't think they were saying that, by the way. I think you only make a few moves.
Right.
It's more of that, which I think makes sense. That's feasible and the most feasible plan to me, by the way, too.
Okay. If you're going to keep the roster similar and not make a whole bunch of wholesale changes, not get a whole new roster, wouldn't you think that to inject some life, you just would change the manager? Isn't that what baseball teams do? Because of the fact that you can't change, because, the fan in me says just sell everybody, get rid of everybody, start over. Obviously, it's not really feasible, but the notion is, and that's why we're discussing it, is that the fans are tired of this roster, that they don't believe that this roster can compete for a World Series. Yeah, you can get to the postseason. Yeah, you could make it back to the World Series. But can you compete with the likes of a Houston or a team in the National League that could be dominant like the Cubs or other teams that are solid or even teams in your own division? Many people are going to say no. So how do you inject life? The first thing is, and sometimes you do have to acquiesce to your customer base because attendance is down. What's one of the biggest reasons why there's no faith in this team? Brad Ausmus sucks as a manager.
But I think he does too. It's no longer his fault. This team wouldn't be better off without him. They're not going to win with anybody. That's my point.
I disagree.
Not in 2017. Last year, they should have fired him when they had a chance to make the playoffs. Should have gotten it over a team like the Baltimore Orioles. And they didn't because of the managerial woes. So that was on Ausmus a lot last year. This year, it's on the roster construction, on the front office head honcho, which is Al Avila.
I disagree wholeheartedly in that the team is not playing fundamentally well. I feel like the team has taken on the personality of the manager. I don't feel like there's enough passion day in, day out. There's too many games. Do you think this team, with the roster and the talent that they have, should go out there and get spanked by the Indians 2 out of 3 games?
Indians are good, though, by the way.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that they should be like winning the games, but you go out there and get blown out.
That happens. Good teams do get blown out, but they're not a good team. That's the thing. Their roster is flawed. The construction of their roster, that falls upon the shoulders of Al Avila, not on Brad Ausmus, who's been dealt a crappy hand each year with the bullpen. The bullpen is still very stinky. Now, I've harped on Ausmus and his mistakes in the past, but the thing is, I don't think it would make a major difference. The Tigers wouldn't be a borderline playoff team without Ausmus as a manager. I don't think they're good enough to just make that managerial change and to start winning all of a sudden.
Okay, then I've heard the other argument on the other side. Okay, let's say that you don't think it's his fault.
Well, it's not as much. Okay. It's more on the front office head honcho Al Avila once again.
That's one argument I've heard. Yep. The other argument from the other side is, what does he add to the table?
Not a ton, but you know what? They're going to keep him. The sad thing is they're probably going to keep him. You know why?
I heard that. You hear that?
For the sake of continuity with their roster next year, because they're not going to do anything with anybody else next year. So for the sake of just keeping it the same.
Why?
Well, the clubhouse guys, they like him. I guess they respect him enough to keep Ausmus around for a 5th year. And
I don't understand.
You know what? That's the reason, though. It shouldn't make any sense, but that's the reason for why it is logical for why they would keep him as a manager for a 5th year. When we thought he could have been fired when? A long time ago. He should have been fired a long time ago. But at this point,
okay, so
they're not going to fire him, I think.
Fine. You're not on the bandwagon of firing Brad Ausmus. That's fine. How do you inject juice into this team this year?
You make some trades still. You still can make some trades. You trade JD Martinez. I think they will still deal him. And I think they will definitely deal Alex Avila as well, because think about this with Alex Avila. He's really been a lifelong Tiger outside of last year with the White Sox. So his best years in a Tigers uniform, his dad is the general manager. So I think you can potentially deal him now, Alex Avila, and have him re-sign with the Tigers after this season. So you could get that, I think, to happen with Alex Avila, who's had a great year out of nowhere, we know. And then JD Martinez, I think they just have to deal because they're not going to re-sign him, and he's such a good commodity right now for other teams that I think they're going to get a very good haul in return for JD Martinez's services. So I think those guys both get dealt for sure, and I think you really have to entertain the idea of dealing Ian Kinsler as well because of the presence of Dixon Machado, who some people like. Brad Ausmus might like a little bit more than others and maybe likes a little bit too much, but I think he commented earlier in the season and said that Dixon Machado is perhaps the best guy as a hitter that doesn't play every day. So the best hitter out there of a guy that doesn't play every day. Well, the way you unjam that clog at second base, or you get him more reps and more ABs, is you trade Ian Kinsler, because his market value has been increasing by the day. His WAR's going up, and he can field. He's still a Gold Glove commodity at second base. His hitting has improved slightly. Still has a little bit of pop in that bat. Getting older, but maybe a team takes him on as a rental. So you might not get a lot in return, and that's maybe why the Tigers will end up just keeping Ian Kinsler. But I think they really have to strongly consider dealing him, and I think they will end up for sure dealing JD Martinez and Alex Avila.
What about Justin Wilson?
I mean, it's a possibility. I just feel like they're gonna get the most bang for their buck. We know for JD, Alex Avila, a better return than they would have ever expected at the start of the season. I don't know about Justin Wilson, what you can get for a relief pitcher, who I think has proven a very good lefty, very high octane lefty with this arm, hard throwing guy. But is he really that steady closer? Is he really that lights out guy that you can compare to Andrew Miller? Is he that kind of a relief pitcher that can just put out, be a flamethrower and put out any kind of fire in any kind of situation? Do other teams really think that with Justin Wilson? They might not.
If you just look to his last performance, that was a nice 5-out performance.
It was, and he first of his career. So, he's got that in his background. The thing is, I still don't think he's as sexy of a commodity as an Andrew Miller, who could get anything in return for. The Indians could if they dealt Andrew Miller right now, or a guy of that caliber. I don't think Justin Wilson is of that caliber yet, and maybe never will be, and that might affect his trade value.
Okay, so overall, the first half obviously very disappointing. They're 9 games under 500. They're one of the worst teams in the American League Central. Everything really around the Tigers is dire. Many people are unhappy, unsatisfied with what's going on. The Tigers aren't really making a ton of moves yet, and looks like they're going to wait probably until the very last minute towards the trade deadline to improve the squad. So it is one of those things where you just kind of weather the storm, and after the All-Star break, you got to hope that maybe they do catch fire. But do you see any potential of a long winning streak, or something where that this team maybe with some days off turns it around? Because it just seems like the rest of the way, they're just at best going to be around a 500 team playing out the string.
They're not good enough to do much more than that. So my belief in them turning it around all of a sudden and maybe putting together a win streak, I'll say this, yeah, it could happen for a 3-game stretch of time, something like that. Maybe for a series, get a series sweep, maybe win 4 in a row. But the thing is, winning more than that is what the Tigers need right now to get back into contention. They're not going to get back into contention. They're not good enough. So that kind of a win streak, a long win streak, is not going to happen this season, in my opinion, the rest of the way, Doc.
Do you find it at all, in any way, shape, or form offensive that the Cubs came back and said, look, we don't want Justin Verlander, we want Michael Fulmer?
The reason why they would say that is because everybody would want Michael Fulmer more than Justin Verlander at this point. Now, Verlander has the postseason stats. Very good outside of the World Series. Remember, in the World Series, he has stunk it up, and in the All-Star game. So maybe on the biggest level, he has stunk it up. But in the playoffs, that does mean something to some teams. Maybe many teams out there. Maybe like the Cubs. Maybe the Astros. But it still comes down to this. What will the Tigers get in return for Verlander at this point? A guy who has struggled for the most part this season. His walks are elevated. I believe more walks already this year than last year, all of last year. Still a lot of home runs, too many home runs that he allows, with that being said. So Verlander's trade value, what is it at right now? Because for me, in order to deal him, since he's been a lifelong Tiger, I think you got to get a great, great deal in return, and the type of deal that you can say full-heartedly at the end of the day that you won, that you come out as the winner. If they can't say they can come out as a winner in a deal involving Justin Verlander, there's no way in hell that they can deal him. Because Al Avila would never be able to get away with it. He would never be able to live in Michigan again. Let me tell you that much. It would be a PR nightmare.
Well, you know what does have real juice?
What is that?
The Home Run Derby. I can't wait to tell you my thoughts. I had a great time Monday, kind of peeking into the Home Run Derby. It was a great display for a lot of young talent, and I'll tell you about my thoughts, and I'm curious to get yours about the Home Run Derby after this quick timeout.
Doc, you know about the Detroit Sports Commission by now. I hope more and more people do, and let us inform you through this very message about the DSC. Since 2001, the Detroit Sports Commission has applied its expert touch to marketing and to selling the Metro Detroit area as a marquee destination for regional, national, and international amateur sporting events. And through the Detroit Sports Commission's help, these events have attracted thousands of visitors and pumped millions, I mean millions of dollars into our local economy. It is why Detroit is now not only the place where champions are made, but also the place where championships are played. So to find out more about the Detroit Sports Commission and all of the events they are bringing to our very region, please follow the DSC on Twitter and also on Instagram at DET Sports. And make sure to check out their fine website at detroitsports.org. And back here on what is now episode number 98 of Tigers Talk, almost to triple digits, Doc. Very exciting times, and the Home Run Derby was very exciting Monday night, wasn't it?
My goodness, man. Judge lived up to all the hype. Dude is unreal. I think, he was the talk of Major League Baseball with his 30 home runs before the All-Star break. Many people are looking at his stature. Did you like that tweet I sent you regarding his stature compared to, I think it was Jose Altuve?
Jose Altuve, yeah.
It was such a funny picture, the way to look at a guy who's almost a foot taller than another baseball player. Judge can legitimately play in the NFL as a tight end with his stature.
Probably, yeah.
And to also, in terms of the Home Run Derby, in the first round, he faced, he had to hit 23 home runs.
I know, to beat Justin Bohr. Isn't that sad for Justin Bohr? He looked defeated. Did you see his face at the end of that?
It's shocking. I thought, when Steve Chimenti, superfan, messaged me and said, who do you like? I said, obviously, I like Judge. And then Bohr goes out there and hits 22. I'm like, oops, maybe I made the wrong pick.
Yeah, no way, right? But Judge is that good?
Wow. And not only is he that good, he took advantage fully of the extra 30 seconds because if you hit 2, I believe, home runs over 440 feet, you get 30 more seconds. He made it look easy, and that was scary. It was entertaining. And for me, I wasn't really a guy that really enjoyed the Home Run Derby all that much with Chris Berman. The whole back got really old really fast. But I found myself on Monday enjoying the Home Run Derby. I felt like the 4 minutes was perfect. I felt like the entire setup was run pretty good. There's a couple of things maybe you could change with in terms of maybe adding a break here or there or not making the, pitcher, wait for an official to throw the next ball.
Even though some of them didn't wait, if you noticed.
Exactly. But at the same time, I rated it an A+. It had a lot of juice. And the reason why, you had a plethora of guys. Unlike the NBA dunk contest where the biggest names don't do it, the biggest boppers in the game were involved. Giancarlo Stanton, Judge, Gary Sanchez, and that's what you need. You need guys that are known as home run guys in there with a mix of, other guys as well, but you need a mix of boppers to go up there and contribute and do the job. And it was an entertaining thing. It was very well done. For me personally, I didn't get caught up in the whole announcing crew. I kind of lowered the volume a little bit. I didn't get into the whole Jessica Mendoza and her screaming and yelling.
People slammed her. You know what?
I didn't get it. You know what I do? When I knew people were going to be complaining about how the announcing was going to go, I think people were like nitpicking Carl Ravitch beforehand. And I said, look, I don't care about Boone. I don't care about Carl Ravitch. I don't care about Mendoza. I have a thing called a controller. And I just lowered the volume.
Mute it, right?
And I was searching the internet, just reading and catching up and watching the Home Run Derby without the announcers. I didn't need it because the nature of the game is simple. They're going to pitch the ball to the hitters. The hitter's going to swing as hard as he can. And does the ball go out of the park or not? And what's the distance? I don't need any extra analysis. So I used the greatest button on earth that's available for people that don't want to hear the announcers butcher a performance, the mute button. And it was great. I enjoyed it. It was on in the background. I got to do other things. But overall, the Home Run Derby was awesome. One of the better ones, I would say, in the last 5 years.
A+ production level, you could say, because of all the big names. Like you said, comparing it to the NBA Slam Dunk Contest at All-Star Weekend is not even, there's no comparison at all. You have Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Gary Sanchez, Miguel Sano, even Justin Bohr. I mean, all these talented guys who are on the younger side, by the way, in their careers. Cody Bellinger, maybe a guy the Tigers could have had in an Ian Kinsler trade this past offseason. all these guys put on good shows too. Really, nobody stunk it up, and nobody had a Brandon Inge-esque performance at the home run derby.
Everyone
remember that
right?
too.
Did he have 0?
He had 3 or something. Jason Bay hit 1 or 0. Do you remember that? How bad those guys were?
Yeah.
These guys were all terrific on Monday night. They put on a show in Miami, man. Was full of energy, and they saw a great home run derby, maybe the best of all time, because you had the two best sluggers in today's game, and Stanton and Judge going at it. I mean, that was cool to see. And Stanton got knocked out first round. Justin Bour did better than him, the other Miami Marlin in the competition that nobody thought would have a chance. He was killing it, and Stanton was loving it. Did you see Stanton go out there? He slammed his mic set at one point because he was on the broadcast with Jessica Mendoza, Mark Teixeira, and Carl Ravitch. At one point, Bour was just heating up and killing it so much, Stanton dropped his mic, his headset, and went right over to Bour.
Wow.
Unbelievable, right?
Yeah, it was unbelievable to watch, and I think Major League Baseball is in a great state because of how many young sluggers, premier young players overall-wise, that it has in its game right now.
And the Tigers have a plethora of them, too, that we're talking about, right?
So many.
Steven Moya, where he's going to come up, he's going to dominate. Oh, yeah, that's him dropping another ball in the outfield. Oh, yeah, that's him missing another cutoff guy. Oh, yeah, you got to play 2 ways in baseball. You got to be out there and field your position, Mr. Moya. It's unfortunate for him because of the nature of him not being in the majors. He got demoted. He's not AAA anymore. He's down, I think, is AA Erie?
AA.
AA Erie. You believe that?
Well, he's not hitting either.
Yeah.
So a guy like that who's huge, who can't do anything else but hit home runs at it, because he can't really hit for average. Well, he's showing that now on a large scale, that he can't even hit AAA pitching for power. So if there's no pop in his bat, and if he's hitting, I don't even know if it was 200. It was very low, maybe below the Mendoza line. So Moya, he was going to be sent down. It was due to happen. And sad but true, that guy was their top position prospect. Think about it. Their top positional prospect at one time was Steven Moya, and Moya is now relegated to AA duty, and you see another large dude in Aaron Judge just killing it at the major league level right now. The most rookie home runs by a Yankee of all time are at the All-Star break. Joe DiMaggio at 29, Aaron Judge has 30. I mean, to see him doing what he has been doing, and then to know that the Tigers don't have a great position player that is young right now in the minors or at the major league level, that just tells you, screams at you, what state the Tigers farm system is in, which it still exists in a pretty darn depleted state, which isn't good for the future, obviously.
No doubt about it. It's one of those things where it makes me jealous. You see guys like Judge. I mean, you got New York basically in a tizzy because of the fact that he's box office. You got Fulmer, you got Upton, you got Miguel Cabrera, but in terms of
young, how about young talent, right? Young position players. Iglesias, Machado, Castellanos, maybe McCann. McCann's not there. None of those guys are there, are good enough all around, because you need a good two-way player. Judge isn't great defensively, by the way. He's not going to get to all the balls there in the corner outfield, but he's playing the corner outfield for a reason. And maybe one day he'll be a first baseman with his height, or a DH, probably a DH in the Bronx. But he's box office material. That's what it comes down to. Do you have box office material? In the Bronx, if you're good, you become box office instantaneously.
No doubt about it. Now, in the Futures game, I forget the name off the top of my head. It wasn't Manning. I think it was the other young pitcher that was featured. Will Burrows, I think, was in the Futures game and had a solid performance. Do you find solace in the fact that there's a lot of young arms in Erie, like a Manning, like a Bo Burrows, like a bunch of contributing players that are there that could be the core in the future? A Faedo that was recently signed.
Yeah.
Do you think that it opens up a little bit of hope in the future, is to look at some of the young arms in the minors that could come up here and do some things? Or do you think, like, potentially if the Tigers are going to make a move, those guys might be the names that start getting shipped out of here to get talent if they want to make moves? Are they going to be contributors, or are they going to be trade pieces?
Well, you know what? There's more spread out in the minor league system among pitchers. There's more talent all throughout the minor league system among pitchers for the Tigers. Right now, what do you have positional talent-wise? I don't know. They don't have an embarrassment of riches. Let's just say that much. And they need to rebuild their farm system with position players. Until they do so, Doc, they're not going to do anything within their own organization for a while in terms of producing talent, because right now they haven't shown the ability to produce talent among position players. Castellanos, your best position player of late, he's not good enough. Okay? You need a two-way player. It'd be great to have that one day from the Tigers farm system, so a guy that's homegrown that they draft and build up through the farm system themselves. If they do that, when that does start to happen for the Tigers, that means they're turning the corner as an organization. Because right now as an organization, they're towards the very bottom in terms of young talent. They have a lackluster amount of young talent.
Did I read that correctly in the MLB top 100 prospects? Tigers don't have many or
if anybody, Matt Manning. I think Matt Manning in the 70 range, 80 range. I don't even know if he's in the top 100. So, I mean, the point is, regarding all that, is that the Tigers are depleted in their farm system. Matt Manning might be the best thing for their future. Maybe Vito is. I believe he won the College World Series Most Outstanding Player for his performance with the Florida Gators. So he might be something. He probably was a good first-round pick. But how about, I don't know how long ago it was now, but when they picked Derek Hill, do you remember him, the outfielder? First-round pick in the past? Speedy guy, but he's had injuries. Can't hit to save his life, it looks like, so far in the Tigers farm system. What are you going to do with him going forward? You got to get good position players. We don't need a guy that's just speedy. You need a good two-way player, or at least a guy that can hit the darn ball, because Miguel Cabrera's not getting any younger. V-Mart's on his way out soon enough. JD Martinez is probably on his way out. Justin Upton, that is, probably will opt out because of how well he's doing, and really, time will tell with that. If he has a great second half, he's opting out. He's getting paid somewhere else, because if he opts out, the Tigers, I see no way where they resign Justin Upton long term.
Matt Manning, number 61, as they scroll through the list. Nobody in the top 50 in terms of prospects.
And they're not going to have that right now. Nobody's good enough to be in the top 50. Maybe Vito one day. Maybe one day, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen next year either.
So obviously, the thinking is that how do you replenish your minor league system? You got to make trades, you got to make moves, you got to do well in the draft, and you got to hit. But right now, in terms of organizational numbers, doesn't seem like there's too many. Yeah, I think Matt Manning might be the only one.
I think he is in the top 100.
That's it.
Well, he's good enough at least to be in the top 100. But he's your saving grace now. You got to rely upon him. And what if they do get good sometime soon? Do you deal him? But they don't have a surplus of young talent. I don't think they should. And they won't consider dealing him in the near future, in the next year or two. Maybe 3 years, 4 years, probably 4 years down the line. But he'll be up in the big leagues by then. He better be a good contributing big league arm. Even 3 or 3.5 years from now. He kind of has to be that for the Tigers to, I think, to be able to say that they have somewhat a budding organization of talent, of young talent.
Unbelievable, Vito. And look, when we talk about the Tigers and we look at the youth, it's just one of those things, they're stuck. They have to be able to replenish the talent and get to the minor league system and bring up more homegrown guys. It's obvious. They tried the free agency route. They tried to bring in big names. It didn't really work. Look at the Yankees model. They brought in free agents, but the core of the team with the Yankees that started winning, involved homegrown guys, the core. And I think you got to start that process. And unfortunately, the core right now, McCann, Iglesias, Castellanos, I don't think people are really high on it. It's not a solid core, not one that I would say, okay, I think you can ride this wave in the next 5 years. I think all of them can be expendable or relegated or let go, or as the word of the day in the NBA, they can be renounced.
Yes, and they can be backups too very easily. I think Iglesias could be. McCann, I think, definitely is. McCann's not a starting catcher. You really think so? He can't hit good enough.
That's what's happened, Vito. The fans of Detroit have renounced the Detroit Tigers this season. They've renounced them.
That much roster fatigue. And you know what? Those young guys you just mentioned, they're not sexy. None of them are sexy commodities that are going to turn me on a Monday morning. They're not going to get me going. No. And who are they really going to get going? They need a better young core to build around, and then you add free agents in the future. The Yankees have taken that model and have started to succeed in the American League East. The Dodgers have kind of taken that model upon themselves and have started to succeed and really have now over a while. And how about the Astros? Young, homegrown talent for the most part. Teams are winning that way. The Cubs, by the way, the Cubs won a World Series last year doing that model, right? Having that model. And then adding some free agents as they got better and better. That's a way to build a model franchise that is going to sustain success nowadays. And maybe it was a model the Tigers should have taken before 5, 6 years ago. But guess what? It is definitely now the model they have to take.
I want to ask you this before we get out of here. One of the talking points that I heard on sports radio, and I think it's a legitimate discussion, is how do you now encapsulate and discuss and review the last 10 years for the Tigers? Was it a waste? Was it something where you pushed all your chips in and went bankrupt, but at least you had some chips to play with? Or do you look at it and you say, you know what, let's give them credit because prior to 2006, the Tigers were god-awful. They were garbage. They were less than garbage. They weren't even worthy of having a weekly podcast to talk about because they were so bad. Now at least we're talking about a team that made it to the World Series, that's given us a lot of great memories, that has done some things, but ultimately, when you ask the question, some people will say, look, all in all, it's still a waste because of the fact that they didn't cash in and get a ring. You brought in all this talent, you spent all this money, you hyped up all the players for the last 10 years, but you didn't get a ring. So in the end, are you one of those people that will say, look, it was a wash, it was garbage, or do you say, look, from where they started to where they ended up, you got to give them some credit.
They lost 119 games in 2003, were dismal, despicable.
Was god-awful.
Before 2006, they were never good in my lifetime. So for me, the 10-year period of time or so has been worth every single second of it. And I think for me as a Tigers fan, big-time Tigers fan at heart, I can't dismiss the fact that they were irrelevant before 2006 when Leland came on board. They made the World Series in his first year as a Tiger skipper and had a nice run for a while. And they garnered a lot of individual accolades. Remember that. Miguel Cabrera, Triple Crown winner, 2-time MVP award winner. JV in 2011 winning the MVP and the Cy Young in the same season. My God, a lot of individual accolades, but no bling-bling to show for it. That's the sad truth that the Tigers have to start accepting. We do, Doc, you and I as Tigers fans. But I would say still overall-wise, it was worth every darn second of it, and I will never regret the movement they took to get better in terms of by kind of, doing it via free agency, via the big trades that cost them a lot of prospects. I think it was worth it because other teams have won using that model. The Yankees used to. Now, it hasn't been done in a while maybe by a team. But teams also have been good. Like the Tigers have had their good runs without winning a World Series, without putting a ring on it. The Rangers as well were very good, never won it. So remember, other teams have been good and have never won it. The Buffalo Bills, 4 straight Super Bowls, right? In the NFL, never won a Super Bowl. Never were able to hoist a Lombardi trophy. But can you really, criticize them or say it was a waste of time? Like Buffalo Bills fans, do you think it was a waste of time for them?
Ooh,
I don't know. See? Because you can compare the Tigers almost to an organization like that. Not quite as severe, obviously. They made 4 straight Super Bowls.
Yeah, but if you ask me for the Lions, could you handle 4 Super Bowl appearances?
I think, yeah.
And
God,
losses,
yeah.
I would say no.
See, no, hell yeah.
No, hell no.
The Lions, where they been? Futility? You brought up futility. Futility is like their team name is in the dictionary, right by futility.
You would take 4 Super Bowl appearances and 4 consecutive losses.
Yeah. Now, it'd be hard for me, you know what? I guess I'm not as big of a Lions fan as I am a Tigers fan. That would be hard to take as a Tigers fan. Yeah. It really would be.
It'd be super
it would
tough.
Suck.
I couldn't handle it. I'd be so devastated. I would say I'd rather not even get there 4 times if we were going to lose all 4. Looking back at it, the Buffalo Bills fans, I think they still suffer now to this day regarding the fact that field goal went wide right.
And that just doesn't happen. A team losing that many times in a row and never winning at all. They were that close.
Tough, man.
It's tough to take. But for the Tigers, well worth it still.
Yeah, exactly. From where they were, I think that what makes the call of Maglio's home run to get to the World Series that first time around was Dan Dickerson saying, look, this team was a team that a couple of years ago lost over 100 games, and now they're in the World Series winning the American League pennant. It was special. It was awesome. And it was a good run. Unfortunately, you're right. We don't get the payoff. It was a lot of hype. It was a lot of missed opportunities. But I think a lot of people now are starting to reminisce. They're starting to look ahead. But at the same time, we're waiting for basically the dam is full of water. We're just waiting for the person to open the dam so that the water can go through, damn it, and relieve some of the pressure. That's what we're waiting for. Either it's going to be firing Ausmus, making a trade, starting the process of rebuilding this roster. And that's what people are waiting for. That's the perfect analogy, is that there's a bunch of water backed up in the dam and more water's coming, but they ain't opening the goddamn dam. So open the dam so we can start the process before, the foundation cracks and people get all restless and antsy and nervous. Start the process, release the dam, let the water go through, and let the, water find its level in terms of rebuilding the Detroit Tigers.
And speaking of that, the Tigers start dealing off guys, and maybe only a few guys. You know what? The future won't be so bleak. It won't be. Remember that, Tigers fans, too. Don't have to freak out and think it's going to take 4 or 5 years for the Tigers to get good again. Remember that poll question.
I disagree with you there, too, because many people that have commented don't trust the guy making the moves, in that we have to see what Al Avila does, and we'll continue going forward on this Tigers Talk podcast to evaluate what Al Avila is really doing, because many people aren't confident that the man that could be in charge of rebuilding the Tigers is the right guy for the job, because he's the guy that saddled us with Jordan Zimmerman, and Jordan Zimmerman sucks.
And we don't know how much maybe Mr. I forced his hand in signing a guy like Jordan Zimmerman or Justin Upton. Remember that too. But the onus is on Avila to make moves and to get this team righted. Because if he doesn't, his job is potentially on the line as well. So his hugest test yet as Tigers general manager is going to be this trade deadline. Definitely.
And many people are looking at the notion of you let Max Scherzer go out the door, and if it was Dombrowski and Avila, they were on the same management team, and you had a guy that's still flame-throwing and goes out there, strikes out 10 almost every time he goes out there, and isn't doing a whole heck of a lot of giving up runs and home runs, and many people are starting to say, ooh, we might have paid the wrong guy. We might have.
They might have.
We might have paid the wrong guy. We might have let Scherzer go out of respect for JV, and that probably was a big, huge mistake if you really look at it. If Justin Verlander continues down this road of being around a 500 pitcher.
Well, Mr. I said screw you to Max Scherzer, though, remember. So maybe Mr. I kind of cost the Tigers in negotiations because they gave him a great offer. Scherzer gambled on himself. How many times did it work out for the guy that gambles?
But
not a lot. But he gambled and it worked out.
We have a couple more years to look at it, and he also took a deal where he's getting paid a lot of money on the back end. So he was willing to.
Wise, and it worked out for him. He's a wise man. You can tell he took out insurance on his arm.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a wise man. He might win the NL Cy Young. Again, by the way, too.
So, you have to look at the pieces in place in terms of the managerial upper management in terms of the Detroit Tigers. So we'll wait and see. And I think that wraps up this very fine podcast this week.
Thank you much to Doc. And thanks to all of you for listening to this very fine edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. We'll talk to you again next Wednesday.
And you can find and listen to all the podcasts on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network by visiting our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Subscribe and like and review on iTunes. Thank you so very much.